name's Chris. Welcome to the shed for 2019. Welcome to Flat Tank Friday. Been a pretty good week in the shed. Got a bit done. While you're away and having a holiday, I made a carbide canister bracket for the bike, and that came out really well. It was pretty boring and pretty tedious stuff. Just involved a lot of heating and a lot of bending and a bit of painting. I've got that mounted to the bike, and if you slip over to Facebook and have a look at Flat Tank Journey on Facebook, you can see a few pictures that I put up there. Sorry I didn't make a video. It was just boring stuff. This week, the highlight of the week has really been having a go at the footboards, or the foot pegs to be more precise, and the exhaust manifold. My Freudian thing though with the foot pegs and footboards is interesting. One viewer has asked whether it's meant to be a footboard model. Maybe it is, I'm not sure. It came with the footrests on it, the way it is, and that's the way I'm going to leave it. But it does pose a question of whether it would have mounted differently if it had footboards, and would it have clearanced the exhaust manifold. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Most of the pictures you see have got footboards. Very few have footrests. I'm really not sure, to be honest. Anyway, have a look at what I've been up to of the week. I hope you enjoy it. Here's the materials to do something about, I suppose, widening out the footrests on the Douglas, especially on the right hand side where the rubber, which is very perished and very sad looking, is going to hit on the exhaust. I actually believe that the foot pegs were wider and that these have been made, well, undoubtedly. On the bike when I got it, that's 5/8 threaded rod, or all thread, or whatever you want to call it, and there's nuts on the end. And so I've just been down to the hardware store and bought a new piece of 5/8 all threaded rod and tested the nuts, and that fits up fine. So I've got plenty of that. I then went out to my metal supplier and bought some of what I call black seamless pipe, or steam pipe maybe, depends on what school you went to, and the inner diameter of that is a smidge over 5/8. So the threaded rod slides into that really just comfortably. There might be a few little burrs in there, and you give it a tap. So I'm going to use that to make some spaces and widen out the whole thing. So let's get into it, see how it comes out. Well, like nearly all of my jobs, I like to take them apart in order, and then I don't mind a video or a picture, oddly enough, of the order things come off in. So nut, conical spacer, foot peg rubber, washer, and the same on the other end. I've laid them out right and left, just in case that I find later there's a right and left side to things. I don't think there is in this case, but it won't matter. Now, interestingly, I'm looking at the foot peg and I'm thinking someone's bent that. It was either made bent or someone bent it. And then looking at the threaded rod that came out of it, somebody's bent it. And somebody's tried to bend the right hand side upwards so that it would clear over the exhaust, but it just hasn't worked out. So I might even have to take a little more out of the exhaust, and I never mentioned it in the previous video, but yes, I know I'm restricting gas flow, but I don't think it's a big deal. So I might have to knock a little more out of the exhaust, or I might have to bend the threaded rod. There's a fair bit of bend in that, might be 3 or 4 mil. So that's interesting to see. Amazing what you find when you pull things apart. Let's move over to the bike and put this threaded rod through and see if it clears the exhaust. The threaded rod has gone through really easily and cleared the exhaust, and so has the foot peg. So I'm really pleased with that. Excuse the fact that I'm doing all this with a handheld. I'm trying to bring you in as close as I can to let you see what everything looks like. So you can see the threaded rod, and that's the size of the spacer I'm going to make. And then I'm going to prime it and paint it with a gloss black, and I'm going to hope that no one ever sees that it's in there, or if they do, I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over it. At this end, you'll notice I've left the threaded rod long. You can always cut a bit off later. there's no need for me to cut that back so quickly. I'll see how I go. If I'm really comfortable with it, I might shorten it off. The threaded rod only cost me $10.80, so it's not as though I'm playing with something that was tremendously expensive. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to measure this spacer, and I'll try and bring you in. Actually, I'm going to put you down and I'll bring you back with the measurement. I've just had a measure of that threaded rod and I'm going to call it 35mm. In reality, probably anything over 25mm would be okay. But I'm just going to pull that foot peg rubber a little bit further away from the exhaust so that we don't get any singeing of the rubber or melting. Everything's going to look alright and we shouldn't have too many troubles. I'm going to cut that black steam pipe a little bit long, then I'm going to face each side off in the lathe so it's nice and true, and then I'm just going to clean out the centre of the pipe so that there's no burrs or any dags inside it. You're looking at two pretty roughly cut pieces of black pipe, and they're not seamless at all, like I told you. They get a seam up the middle, so I might even have to run the boring bar down that to just smooth that seam off. It won't go over the all thread really easily. I'm going to face these off and chamfer the ends to make them nice and neat, and I'm going to bring them down to a neat 35mm. I've faced off one end of that, put a little chamfer on it. Now I'm just going to face off the other end. I've got a little mark on it and bring it down to 35mm, and then we'll chamfer that off. Stop and have a little measure at it. I got a couple of mil to go. It's easy to take a bit more off, but it's awful hard to put a bit back on. I reckon I've taken about 1.5 mils and might have another little measure at it. Pulled up short again. Yeah, about 3/4 millimetre to go. Going to touch the end of it lightly, back out. I'm going to take 0.5 millimetre. We'll have another little look at it, so if I'm getting close. I'm going to call that good. In the scale of things, it doesn't need to be that close. Here's the multi-fix, knock it off. Comes off that simple. Spin it round. Chamfer tool. And ready to go. Just attempt to knock the inner edge out. There's a bit of swarf sitting in there. I'm going to pull that out and run the file through it. Well, there's the first spacer. It's cleaned out really well. I've machined both sides and I've put a little chamfer on it. I'm just using a rat tail file to file out the inside. I'm going to tidy that up a bit more and then I'm going to make another one. I won't bore you with the second one and then we'll get to installing it all. There's two spacers. They're almost identical. Might be a tiny bit longer one than the other. In reality, it doesn't actually make any difference. They're on different sides of the bike and it is of no consequence. I'm going to slide all this out, put a spacer on and then slide it back in. That's going to be fantastic. I have every expectation that the other side will be the same. I'm going to put the other side on and then I'll bring the camera in and give you a close-up of what I've done. Because then it's time for paint. Maybe cut the bolts off, maybe not. All good. Here's the footrest reinstalled. And if I bring you down really closely, you should be able to see the shiny edge where the spacer is. And that's a 35mm spacer I just put over the new threaded rod. Coming back and coming up the side of the bike, you can now see that the brake pedal is really probably in a better position than it was before. I should have had video of that for you. It looks really good. I'll lift you up and you can come round and see the other side of the bike. Here's the other side. Probably seems less important and the foot seems as though it's a little bit further away. I'll measure both sides to make sure they're the same distance because the weirdo in me will want them the same. And given that this threaded rod is hanging out by about 600mm and that's got tear my private parts off as you walk past it written all over it, I am going to cut that back and leave maybe 20 or 30mm hanging out the end. That's got disaster written all over it. So it's a pretty good outcome. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it solved an exhaust problem and it certainly solved a foot peg problem or footrest problem. As I stand back here behind the bike, there's quite a pronounced drop onto the right hand side. Maybe that's from braking or more pressure on the right or mounting the bike on one side. Not sure. Here's the temporarily finished foot peg holder for the Douglas. It's 5/8 threaded rod. Went to the hardware store, bought some. Just cut it to length. Just put a chamfer on each end and then made a couple little spaces out of some steam pipe that I bought. I have buffed that down, cut to length and given a little prime and a paint. I'm going to fit all this up to the bike now and see how it fits. I expect everything to go really well. I expect the threaded rod to be long. I've done that on purpose. It'll be easier to cut down later than it will be to add a bit on. Let's have a look and see if it all fits. Alright, let's hope this all works out. You can see what I'm trying to do and instead of seeing me, we're getting a bit closer. Here's the threaded rod. The foot peg mount is just in there behind the exhaust. Going to feed it right in. Then there was a washer. Then this is the spacer I made, 35mm. Line it back through. The foot peg itself. Out here is an end for the rubber and the nut. Now that rubber's clearing the, I've just got a bit of paint on there, so just bear with me while I do that nut up. Right, Now the foot peg can't touch the exhaust. The exhaust is just clearing the bottom of this piece. It's steel and it's powder coated. Could melt the powder, I don't know. Yes, I have restricted the flow of the pipe a little bit. Not a huge amount, so I'm hoping that doesn't have an effect. I'm not sure it will. I'm not sure these were high performance in any shape or form. I'm going to put the other side on and tighten that up, and then we'll have a close look at all of it. See how it looks. Back looking at the right hand side of the bike, foot peg bolted up. You can see that I've got about inch and a quarter of all thread hanging out. I will cut that off and get it down to perhaps 3 or 4 mil in the end. In the short to medium term though, I'm going to leave it just how it is in case I need to move the foot pegs out for any reason. And I don't know what the reason would be, but it might be. When you look in really close, hopefully you can see the spacer. There's a washer behind the spacer. That was with the bike when I got it. Then there's the spacer, then there's the foot peg. You might be able to see where I've belted the pipe a little bit, or massaged the pipe if you like, to let the foot peg mount go across the top of it. And then there's clearance. We don't have the rubber touching the exhaust anymore, and everything bolts up. Pretty happy with that, I must say. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's how Mr. Douglas intended it to be, but it's a good outcome and it's a solution to a problem that I had, and I've fixed things for, I don't know, 10 or 12 bucks. So that was a good outcome. Let's have a look at the other side of the bike, and we'll call that good for now. Here's the left hand side of the bike itself. Left about an inch and a quarter of all thread out the end. Then there's a nut, big plumed washer, the foot peg rubber. As you look in, you can see the spacer on the washer, the same as the other side. You can hardly see it's there. As we pan backwards, I do think that the left hand foot peg is cocked up slightly, or tilted up, might be a better word. And as you look down both of them, let's hope we can see, the right hand's cocked down a little bit, or tilted down a little bit. It could be just the way the bike's sitting on the workbench. It could be the way it's sitting on the stand. I don't suppose it really matters. The reality is, there had to be a solution. The worst solution was to assume there was a bend in the frame, heat it up, burn the powder, and try and bend the frame. Second solution was to put about a 2 or 3 mil dent in the exhaust and let the whole lot slide over the top. The spacers had to be made anyway because the foot peg rubber would have hit on the exhaust. I think I'm right, so for now I'm going to call it good. But, I've spent $10 or $12, so if I'm wrong and I don't need all that, or I've made a mistake, it's not the end of the world. It's $10 or $12 and a day's work and another day scratching my head and thinking about it. I'm going to call it good for now, and if I'm wrong, we can always fix it later. Well, there you have it. That's Flat Tank Friday for another week. The foot pegs and the exhaust have gone on pretty well, and I've got to get a tailpipe and sort something out. I'm reasonably happy, I think, with the foot pegs. I think they fit reasonably well. I think they'll be safe to ride. 5/8 threaded rod is pretty substantial, although I'm a man of a fuller figure, as you might have noticed. Coming up in the next week or so, I've got the seat coming back, and I'm really excited to see the seat restored. I have seen some photos. I will be putting together a video, and it's well worth watching. The seat looks amazing, so that'll be great. I'm also working on the throttle mechanism, throttle and the air, the choke lever. I got part of a lever off a guy, about half a lever that was pretty poor condition, and I've been working on that on the side. Haven't got a lot of video of it. It's been really time consuming, boring stuff, but it's going along well. I got the carby off the bike, and I've ordered some cables, and I must get on about and do something about the piston. That's Flat Tank Friday done. You have a great weekend. Cheers.